Well, hey guys, and welcome back to another installment of Dan's Pro Shop. Today, we aren't getting into anything crazy, but we are checking off some items from the honeydew list. It's getting to be near springtime here in the old Keystone State, so we gotta get the toys off the lift and get a little more of the work going here, if you will, because it's been raining like a mother for the past 2 weeks, and the yard is about yay high, and I ain't done squat about getting the mower ready for cutting season. So, yeah, naturally put away, tired and wet last year. It's still full of leaves and crap. Got to change oil. I'm sure it's got a couple flat tires, and I'm pretty much guarantee the battery's dead. So, since we got the bike lift here with the side rails, you can put like a golf cart or a side by side on this thing. We're going to get the bike out of here and get the mower up here. Contact. That's so sweet. Yeah, now we'll go grab the other toy. It's nowhere near as cool as that one, but you can't win them all. I gotta tell you, this old girl loyal. Yeah, she struggled and choked a little bit up there in the trailer, but it started for Jiminy Christmas. I mean, this thing's probably been sitting in there for solid 3-4 months ish, and fired off. And I don't think the tires are too flat. They're definitely covered in dog poop. But at least now we're warmed up enough to do a sufficient oil change, go over and grease this thing, maybe even sharpen the blades. So let's just get her on up. Now, for those of you that frequent the channel, you are familiar with this bike lift. But if you're not, welcome. This is a pneumatic 1,200 pound capacity bike lift. It runs on air. Dude, how bloody nice is this? I mean, no matter what you're doing, you can bring it up to a comfortable working level for yourself. And heck, man, even whenever we're not doing stuff, we're just having parties or have people over, we lift this thing up and it's a table. It's just, I don't need to tell you how nice it is. In case you're interested, I'll throw a link down in the description. It is pricey, don't get me wrong. It took me a while to pull the trigger on this old girl, but I have not regretted it a single day since because of crap like this. I'm getting old, the back hurts, the knees hurt, everything hurts. Now, you can do it right up here. It's fantastic. Let's just take a look under the bonnet, shall we? That's what our buddies across the pond call it. But yeah, you can tell this thing was just worked hard and put away wet last year. She's still completely full of leaves. So, I don't know. Before we lose engine temp, we might as well just drain the oil. So obviously, the first thing you're going to want to do is grab the gnarliest, cruddiest drain pan that you have laying outside that's covered in whatever. And try and get this thing crammed up in here. If you guys are unfamiliar with mowers, well, at least Briggs & Strattons and like a lot of Kohlers are the same way. This yellow thing on the side of the engine, this is your drain plug. You do like a quarter turn counterclockwise and just pulls out. That way you're not actually changing or putting the plug in and out of an aluminum block for an unnecessary cause. I don't know. Oil changes are necessary, but this is cool. That gives you that little bit of nice usability. Now, another fancy little dad hack, in case you do not have a piece of hose that fits over this thing properly, like, the manufacturer intended, grab yourself something else. I just happen to have some paper plates sitting over there on the bench. So we can weasel this thing underneath here and make our own formal funnel. So I'm going to turn this guy counterclockwise and yank her out. There you have it. Pull up your dipstick. So we take the vacuum off of the crankcase and just let her drain. So while we're waiting for this old girl, I might as well go ahead and check the air cleaner. Now, if this wasn't like an industrial machine, like a telehandler or like a forklift or something, I would definitely change the air filter on every service. But, you know, that's a residential garden tractor, for goodness sake. I don't know. If you got some money floating around, you're looking for a place to put it, okay. Change every gall darn filter on your lawnmower. But, you know, I mean, this thing isn't all that bad. I would wager to bet that I probably changed it last year. So just go ahead and make sure that the air box is clear. And then the pre-filter, we can actually clean this, re-oil, and reinstall. And then that guy is pretty much brand new again. Now, whenever I say pre-filter, this is the guy that I'm talking about. It's like this expandable, really porous foam looking stuff. We can clean this out, you know, blow it out with some compressed air, maybe some soapy water, get this guy all clean, and then just soak it in regular motor oil. And then this is the pre-filter before it gets the actual paper element, and then the intake for your carburetor is over here. So for as dumb and as simple as this setup may be for a regular garden tractor, you know, the intake is actually rather complex. So it has to go through not only here, not here, but everything to get into the intake. So this is actually a pretty good setup for a dirty situation running engine like this. Oh boy, I'm telling you, man, kneeling down like that's getting rough these days. There was a little bit of air, and just blow the gunk out. I gotta tell you, man, this really is not that bad at all. Like, you can pert near see through it. So I think we're gonna call that good enough for a little shop shower. Douse this thing in some 5W30 and put her back in. Well, I made a fib to you just a little bit. Actually, I found a jug of 1540 diesel engine oil laying around. So, you know, might as well just use that. But whenever I talk about this, I mean, I'm saying just pour it right on the darn thing. And then this helps like collect particulates and make it stick into the pre-filter. So like dust and crud like that, it stays here and has less of a chance of even getting to the primary paper filter. So this is a super common thing, especially with like off-road stuff like dirt bikes. You need to oil your filter. If you run just the filter, man, you're asking for it. You got to oil these things. It makes a difference, I promise. Now, once you have it sufficiently goopy, go ahead and kind of scrunch it together. I mean, you don't want this thing dripping, like, because I mean, it is an intake. So you start sucking oil through your filter, and it's just, you might get a little bit of a rich condition, might have a little going on. So, I mean, you want this thing to be sufficiently oiled, but you don't want it to be dripping when you put it back in the intake. Now that we got our sufficiently oiled pre-filter and wrung out to satisfaction, we'll just go ahead and slap her back into where it's supposed to go and reassemble the intake because everything is looking peachy keen. Man, I tell you what, if you're looking for an excuse to like maintenance your equipment, consider this it. This lawn tractor here, I don't know the exact year, but I think this is like an 01 Troy built, 23 years old, and for the most part it still looks brand new, and I mean it still runs fantastic and does exactly what I need it to do. So, you know, take it from me, change your oil, check your filters, maybe once a year, once a blue moon, actually wash this thing, you know, get all the crud out from the bearings and, you know, the spindles on the deck, and just, you know, take care of your stuff. It will take care of you. Well, that's soaked up about enough time to be done with the crankcase draining. So this guy, just push it back in. It'll like snap and seat an O-ring. Get our our handy dandy paper plate out of the way, but I tell you what, that sure does keep from making a mess. That's a nice little side tip in case you're wondering. And then we take this yellow guy, quarter turn back to the right, and that locks in a couple tabs to keep this thing from just popping out on its own. Put the little beauty cap to keep the gunk out of there, and we're done with draining. Now, since we're over here on this side of the engine, we might as well go ahead and take care of the inline fuel filter. Equally just as important as engine oil. Well, now, I mean, you know, main bearings versus not running at all. Either way, they're both super important. Now, for this little task here, because this line on the inside of the filter comes right off of the tank, if you do not have an inline shutoff, like I do, because I've done this and I've added one and it just makes this process so much easier, you want to get yourself a set of these. These are line crimping pliers. They lock in the position that you put them on. So you can actually smush that line and it will stay shut. So you can remove and change this filter without draining the fuel tank in the process. So I will bring you guys in and show you what I'm talking about, that shutoff, in case you've never seen one. So here's the inline fuel filter, and you can see that it goes right into the bottom of the fuel tank. Well, if you do not have one of these inline shutoffs here, focus, I don't know, we're not getting a better shot here. But this guy, it's simple. If it goes this way, it's on. If it's perpendicular, it's off. I think I got this at my local hardware store for like $4. It's well worth it. Just cut your line somewhere and put it in line with it. You turn this guy off, it shuts the fuel off, and then we can change this without making a bloody mess. I'm going to go ahead and shut off the fancy fuel shutoff. Now I'm going to need some pliers for these stupid spring clips on these factory fuel filter things. You know what I'm getting at. Well, now it's pretty apparent that I've been in here before, because one side has a regular hose clamp on it and the other side has one of those spring clamps. I'm guessing that I replaced this because it's behind the air box and it's such a bloody bear to get to. Which, hey, go Dan. So we'll just undo all of these clamps, well, all two of them, one on either side. Twist this guy, get it loose, because these things notoriously like seize to the inside of the rubber fuel line, and they can be just an absolute mother to get out. So whenever we go to put a new one in, show you a little insider tip that'll make this greatly better for you next time. Try to do this without turning into a bloody disaster. But that's not bad, you see? Just that little bit that's in the line, that's the only thing that comes out because of that shutoff. I'll put that somewhere where it drains nicely and try to get this other chunk off. There we go. Now, whenever we go to put the new one in, to make this better on ourselves next time, take your new one and put just a little bit of oil on the pipettes that go into the hose. It's just, and not to mention, these things are directional. I've seen so many people put these things on the wrong way, and it's like completely defeating the purpose. So just make sure that you look at this thing, follow the arrow. The arrow means from the tank to the engine. So you're going to install these ones, make sure you do it correctly. Put that guy in there, that guy in there. Now we can reinstall the clamps. Yeah, that's not another bad idea if you guys are doing this on your own, to replace these stupid spring clamps with an actual, you know, Titan hose clamp. Because, I mean, it's fuel hose. Yes, it is rated for petroleum product and it's good and that, but it does get old. It starts to swell. It gets gnarly and everything. And these spring clamps will lose their tension after a while. So it's just one of those things. Keep an eye on it. But I would suggest changing it to a worm hose clamp, because you can't go wrong. Since we're over here, we'll turn that fuel back on so we don't forget about it. And the last thing on this side is the filter tray. Guys, that's my bad if you couldn't see my head for that. I wasn't paying attention, you know, Cameron and this and that and whatever. But got a new filter. Actually, I buy like a 5-pack off of Amazon. It is way better than going to like Tractor Supply and buying these things individually. Heck, even like your local auto parts store, they can cross this over to like a CarQuest or a Baldwin or a Wix or something. You know, it doesn't have to be this one. I just ran across a good deal on Amazon and I bought a ton of them. So they're sitting over there on the shelf because I do this every year. So just keep that in mind. I will link this. As a matter of fact, all this stuff I can find, I'll link for you. Get you some snazzy oil filter pliers. Oh boy. Get this thing loose. And I tell you what, let me go grab that paper plate again. This really doesn't make all that big of a mess, but you know, why not, right? Take this guy off of here. And since you guys see the orientation of this filter, it's vertical, straight up and down. This is kind of like the, I don't know, the crux in the conversation or the debate, if you will, to pre-fill or not to pre-fill an oil filter. And I mean, for diesels, fuel filters also, well, I mean, you better pre-fill your fuel filters on a diesel. But we're getting off topic here a little bit. Oil filters, you know, there are different schools of thought. Should you pre-fill it before you put it on? It's, honestly, I feel like it's contingent on what you're doing. You know, if your filter's in a dumb location, especially like these newer vehicles with the element paper filter that goes right in the top of the engine, no. But if you have a cartridge filter and it's in the right position like this, definitely pre-fill it. So now we got this thing out of here. Clean up your surface where the gasket goes. I know the other one just came off of there, but take some time, clean it up. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to pre-fill this thing because it's in the correct orientation. So why not, right? It's not going to hurt. So here we got us a jug of Pennsylvania Premium Wolf's Head Super Duty Semi-Synthetic. How do you like that? Now, I'm a local auto supply and truck store up the road. You know, they have this stuff, and you know, it's not Castrol, it's not Valvoline, but it's affordable and it's good oil just to have a case of laying around the shop for dumb crap like this. I love it. I've yet to throw a main in this thing, and it's 23 years old. So we'll go ahead and top this old boy off. I thought about going to bartender school, but ended up being a mechanic. Now, if you want to fill this thing, you're going to be here for a minute because all the oil is now seeping into the paper element in there and everything. Like, it can take a minute to fill it. So I just go until it's pretty well full, wet the gasket. I don't know if you guys saw me doing that. Take a little dip of the finger, wet the gasket before you put it on. Because if you do not, this thing will seize on here like you will not believe. And Thor himself could not get this thing off of here. You'll be in here slamming pry bars through it and cranking it, and you just absolutely destroy this bloody thing trying to get it off. So, on top of oiling the gasket, put this thing on by hand. Just as much as you can do by hand. That's it. Do not put a wrench on this. Do not put a socket on this. Do not put pliers on this. Do not put a band wrench on this. Just tighten it by hand. And that, I promise you, is more than enough. One last little thing that I like to do is mark the oil filter. I put the date that I changed this, at very least like the month and the year of when this was changed. So just in case something happens and I go by I don't know, it's way too long for a service, I can look at that and immediately know when was the last time I did it. So today is April 13th, 24. Now, because this is a crappy regular old garden tractor, it does not have an hour meter. But if it did, I would strongly suggest putting the date and the hours. And that's just a really good rule of thumb for any equipment service that you do. Because, you know, it's kind of like mileage on a car. You know, you should probably change your oil every 3 months or every 3,000 miles or whatever the interval is for the vehicles nowadays. But with equipment, you know, this thing may just sit there and idle for 10,000 hours. Well, maybe not this thing, but probably like a D4 dozer or something, you know? Well, that engine is still working regardless if the machine is working. So that hour meter is way better to go off of than the date or some kind of timeline. So I strongly suggest if you have an hour meter, put the date and the hours. That makes a difference, I promise you. Well, now all that baloney's done. That's pretty much the meat and potatoes of this here project. And then, let me grab a funnel. I don't feel like making a mess here. Nice. Grab your cruddiest funnel from the bottom of the bench there. Fill her on up. And I just happen to know from doing this, actually, I believe I have it wrote on the front of the fuel tank in Sharpie also. This engine takes like 1.92 quarts or something. And since we pre-filled the filter, maybe a skosh less. But we'll start with 1.5, check it, go from there. But I'm pretty sure that this thing takes right about like 2 quarts even. And in case you guys are wondering, this is a single hole 20 horse Kohler. Yeah, a Kohler Cougar. Not the Mellencamp Cougar, like the Cougar. What the hell? And we'll go ahead with old Wolf's Head number 2. Go ahead and start dunking her in. As Derek would say, drink up, little buddy. Got all those nice vitamins and minerals for you down there. So let's stop there and just give the dipstick a little check, shall we? Because I'm sure that I don't need to tell you how detrimental it is to run an engine out of oil, but it is also pretty darn bad to overfill the crankcase. Because, oh man, it starts getting gnarly stuff. Like your PCV will just suck straight oil, and you get that wind effect from the crank in there. Well, if it's overfull, that doesn't happen, so it doesn't properly lubricate the bottom end of your engine. Either way, just make sure you put the correct amount in. I tell you what, we're just a skosh over full there, and we need to circulate everything. And like I said, that filter isn't full. So I'd say that's a good point. We'll crank this thing over, let it run for a minute, suck fuel through the new filter, and we'll come back and check it again. Give it a go. Oh, come on. I was just talking so good about you. Don't do this. Choke it. Yeah. Atta girl. Well, I think that's sufficient enough to get proper circulation. Go back here and chop the old dipstick. See what we got here. Woo! My oh my, we about nailed that. Now I have to get a lottery ticket. That never happened on the first go. Yeah, man. I'd call that good. Now we can kind of get into some cleanup around here. Well, since the service part of this project is pretty well done, let's do some crap while it's still up here on the lift. I'm going to check the tire pressure and grease the thing. Grease the thing. Whenever you're dealing with equipment, I don't care what you're doing. Construction, farm, home, whatever. Grease your machinery. These are just moving metal pieces. Whenever they move together, they don't get along. You need to have something in between to be the mediator. A little grease goes a long way, especially with these crappy spindles on garden tractors. I'm telling you, man, grease, grease, grease. For as many times as I've done this over the years, I cannot, for the life of me, remember what the heck the PSI on these things is. I think the rear ones are 10 PSI. And I tell you what, you guys may be a little far away to see this, but these tires are the OG OEM tires that came on this thing. Man, the sidewalls are cracked to all beat. But actually, I put tubes in these things like 4 or 5 years ago because these tires are so dumb expensive if you ever looked for them. Either like Home Depot, eBay, whatever. These rear ones are probably like 50, 60 bucks a piece, and the front ones are like 40-ish. Well, I mean, the tread is still fine because, these things wear like iron. This is like the tire on like a CRF 50, those things, they last forever. but eventually they start cracking and then they just don't hold air anymore. Get yourself a tube. They're like $3. Dismount one side, put a tube in there. There you go, man. That's all it is. These tires will last you for freaking ever if you tube them. Oh, what do you want to be? I know the smaller ones got more. 14. Believe it or not, that's actually kind of a thing in the world of tires. The smaller the tire, usually the higher the pressure. And, you know, that's just kind of like a physics thing. Because it's smaller, it can handle a greater amount of pressure. Like a good example of the opposite direction, like a bigger tire, lower pressure, is monster truck tires. A Gravedigger with them giant BKT tires that are 20 feet tall or what, I don't know. They're giant. Those things run like 5 to 8 psi. And it's just, that's how it works. It's just a nifty physics thing. Cool. Now the tires are sufficient, we're going to do that greasing. Now, I know I sound like a parakeet here with the grease thing. Grease, grease. But it is super important. And on smaller lawn and garden crap like this, there isn't much to service. But these front spindles and these ones I kind of retroed a little bit. Where the spindle goes through the hub on these, they're supposed to be like a bronze wear bushing in there instead of a wheel bearing. Because, I mean, you're not going down a highway with these. But I installed a Zerk fitting so I can pump the hub full of grease also. I don't know if that's a detrimental thing because now it's like trapping crap in the hub instead of just being a dry wear bushing. But like I said, this thing is old and it's a testament to the maintenance. So I don't know if that's the right way, but it sure as heck works. So here's a better view of that spindle Zerk fitting I was talking about. Just go on there, give her a couple pumps until we start seeing it come out the top and the bottom. Do the same thing on the other side. Now, I was telling you I added grease fittings to the hub of the wheel, and that is this guy right here. And that will just fill up the entire hub of this thing. Where the spindle goes through the wheel, now she's just fully encased in grease. That wasn't a factory thing. I put that in there a long time ago. So like I said, that may not be the right way, but I think it works great. Do the same thing over here with this fella. Come on. Come on. There you go. All right. Not much. Like 2.5 pumps and she's putting out new stuff. So, I mean, this is little stuff. I mean, we're not talking mining equipment here, but it's the same premise. The more you take care of your crap, the better off you are. Please excuse me for a moment. I just getting a little parched. So like I mentioned, with this smaller stuff, there's not a ton of grease points. Those are the big ones for your typical lawn tractor. And honestly, I don't even know about stuff for like new garden tractors because I'm such a big fan of keeping stuff around for as long as you can. Because I don't know if you've seen these like sitting outside Home Depot or Lowe's or Tractor Supply or whatever. These things are ridiculously expensive now. I mean, I don't know. I see like, you know how Home Depot has like those knockoff John Deeres. Like, trust me, it's not a John Deere. It may be green and yellow and it's got the stickers on the hood, but I promise you with every ounce of my being, it is not a John Deere. It is just a regular old Briggs & Stratton tractor with different stickers on it. If you want a Deere, you got to go to a Deere dealership. Same thing with the other stuff. Like there's a couple of hardware stores around here that sell like Husqvarna lawnmowers. Like, you're not getting a Husqvarna at T&M Hardware. I'm sorry, it ain't happening. You want a real machine, you got to go to a dealership. So that's a buyer beware from me to you. Take that for what you will. But the whole point here, these things are ridiculously expensive nowadays. I mean, everything's ridiculously expensive. Gas is $4 a gallon, for goodness sake. But if you have something like this that's still in good shape, it's not rotted out. That's the big one. As long as the chassis is still together, you can fix an engine till kingdom come as long as there ain't a hole in the case. But yeah, now we've done that. I'm going to go through with the shop vac. I'm sure the pressure washer would be a better way to do that, but we're still in very early spring here, and I ain't turned the spigot back on in the house yet, so I got no water outside. So maybe I'll just jam the shop vac in there, get all the leaves and gunk out of here from on top of the deck and back here in the steering rack, and then go over this thing with a little bit of, you know, spray lube, because this rack and pinion here for the steering, that's all it is. It's an exposed rack and pinion gear. I'll show you guys in case you don't know what I'm talking about, but just lube that thing up, you know, to help the medicine go down, and we'll clean this thing up good. Because why not? It's here, you know, it's a Saturday. Why not? Take a little bit of time, have a little bit of pride in your work. And not to mention, if you keep this thing clean, it's obvious and evident when you start having an issue. Like if the valve cover gasket starts leaking or, you know, something, you can tell. If this thing's caked in 30 years worth of oil and grease and gunk and hay and what, if something's leaking, you don't know. Yeah, I mean, you don't know until the rod comes out of the block and says hello from the other side. You know, if this thing's clean and you look at it and you check your oil regularly, like, hey, that's new, you can take care of it before it becomes a problem. So, you know, do what you will, but I think that is a good thing to do for regular maintenance. Well, I tell you what, she's not winning any awards at the car show, but not looking too bad. I got to tell you, I'm conflicted at the minute. Should I or should I not rip the deck off and just sharpen the blades and do all that crud now while it's here? I don't really want to, but I suppose it's been a minute since I have. Man, I talk myself into more work all the time. We could just be done and go mow now, but let's just do it. So in case you are unfamiliar or you haven't done this before, because hey man, there's got to be a first time for everything, right? So if you haven't, here you go. Taking a deck off a riding tractor ain't all that bad. There are some that are easier than others, like, you know, when you get into the better stuff, like a real deer or like a Cub Cadet and stuff, you know, there's just like pins you pull and it, whoop, this thing comes right out. But for the most part, it really is just a couple pins. This guy here is like the track bar that controls the up and down for the setting of your deck height. And then in the front, there is a tie rod that like holds everything, you know, like kind of parallel to the bottom of the tractor. And then we got to undo the belt. I promise you, there really isn't that much involved in this thing. So I'll just bring you guys back, give you a wide angle, and let you know how this goes. Now, because I've done this so much over the years, I have changed some of this. Oh, somebody's getting it over there, huh? Because I've done this so much over the years, I have changed some of this hardware from nut and bolt to like a hitch pin. So if you'd like to do that for yourself, by all means, knock yourself out. Just make sure that you keep note of the orientation of how everything goes, of the levers and bars and brackets and this and that, and put everything back in the same direction. Wow, that guy's still cooking it down there. Man, that's definitely a second gear burnout if I ever heard one. He's still going. There you go, caught third. Yeah. Whew. I can pert near smell that from here. Either way, make sure you know the orientation of everything so you don't shoot yourself in the foot when you go back together. So something that might even help you, take the cell phone out of your pocket or use the one that you're watching right now, whatever, and snap a little photo so you know how this thing goes back together. You don't have to guess. And once you have all your linkage disconnected, take it back up to its highest setting. Get it up out of your way. Last thing we got to do is disconnect the drive belt for the deck from the pulley underneath. And that frees up everything, and you can yank this out of here in one piece. And that's quite literally all she wrote. Let's grab something to put this old girl on. I don't feel like getting a hernia off of a stupid weekend project. This is another beautiful thing about having a lift. You can do this crap without laying on the floor. Anchor on out. And there you go. You got to remove the deck. Well, I guess that kind of negates the whole thing that I just tried to clean it out from underneath, because now we can... Oh, anyway, let's flip this thing up and see what we got underneath. Oh, let's just see what we're cooking with here. It would probably be better to go this way, huh? Oh yeah, that'll do it. Wow, I gotta tell you, that is in way better bloody shape than I anticipated. Evidently, me cleaning up paid off. But at very least, I can now get to the grease fittings that are on the spindles, because that is one of the biggest like failure points on a regular old crappy lawn tractor. I would say the spindles up front on the steer tires are probably number one. The spindles on the blades are a strong number two, because these things are exposed to so much gunk and everything whenever you're mowing, and you know the water and stuff, everything just sits there and it just eats these bearings alive. So make sure you pack these things real good. So in case you guys don't know what I'm talking about this spindle here, this cast aluminum thing holds the blade onto the deck, and on the other side of this shaft is the drive pulley that comes from the belt on top of the deck. There are bearings in here that allows this thing to move, let's just say, freely. And if those bearings get cruddy, you know, this just, you know, this comes apart. It's like a bad wheel bearing. You get all kinds of vibrations and it's bad news. This thing will just come apart on you. So if you have a grease fitting on yours, pack the ever-living crap out of that thing. Get the water, get the gunk out. Just keep going until you get good grease coming out of the ends. But before we do that, we might as well rip these things off and sharpen the blades, because, you know, I may hit a rock or two in my day. Grab you a cordless impact, by far the best way to do this. I mean, if you got an air impact, whatever. I'm just saying, impact. If you try to do this with a socket wrench or something, you will fight this thing to kingdom come. You definitely want an impact. The majority of blade nuts are 15/16, at least for tractors anyhow. For push mowers, I'm not really sure, because it's usually a bolt, and I really think that most of them are 9/16. Don't quote me on that, but the majority of these guys are 15/16. Grab you an impact socket on an impact gun, just send it. Now, if you try to do that with a 1/2-inch wrench, dude, trust me, you want an impact. Now that we got these guys off of here, take note to the orientation, because you can put them on upside down and it will pretty much render your mower useless, because these things actually create a suction whenever they're running. So like it pulls the grass up in a more vertical state while it's mowing. So just make sure that this thing goes back on the same way you took it off. So if you need to, like, put a little bit of spray paint on there or something, so you know how this thing goes back on whenever you're done sharpening. Now, as far as sharpening goes, we are going to do this the most high-tech way possible. Got a milk crate laying around. Throw that guy on her. And get us our crappiest, oldest cordless grinder here. We're just going to send it. Now, make sure you get yourself some googles for this process. You know, the good Lord only gave you 2. If you lose them, sorry, man, you're cooked. You know, science hasn't gotten that far yet. So, moral of the story, don't lose an eyeball over working on your lawnmower. So, we're just going to take the grinder here, clean up these edges on both sides. Now, don't go crazy with this. I mean, yes, you are supposed to balance these when you put them back on, and we can do that, but it doesn't look like I really need to take much off of these things. I'm just going to clean them up, put an edge back on them, and we're going to call that good enough. Nice. Yeah. What's that thing they do on Forged in Fire? Like, your blade will cut. As long as you do it right, it will. Well, now we got both of these old girls sharpened up. Like I mentioned, we are going to slam pack these spindles with some grease. Maybe go over this with a putty knife and clean some stuff up. But I got to tell you, I am super duper impressed at how clean the bottom of this thing is. So evidently, I did an okay job last year. May not have been the best, but okay. Let me grab that grease gun. I completely forgot where I put it. There you go, little buddy. Just a spoonful to help the medicine go down. So just keep going. Either I got a giant glob out of the back, or this thing was just that dry. Where are you going? Oh no, the tube's running out. The dreaded grease tube change. Come on! Now we gotta dig through the plethora of gunk over here. Find us a tube of grease. Oh. Don't want no lithium for this guy. There we go. Multi-purpose tractor grease. Just so happens we're working on a tractor. I don't know about you guys, but this particular task can be one of the most cumbersome things in the world if you don't know how to do it correctly. I've seen so many people fight with priming a grease gun. So, you guys seen how I took it out, all right? You pull the plunger, you lock it in the back position. Whenever you go to screw it back together, do not tighten it all of the way. Leave it about a quarter or a half turn undone. Let this guy go, okay? Start pumping it. Uh-oh. Now I'm going to get a schmoo all over the joint. There we go. I got a box. Start pumping this guy with the cartridge loose. Feed the plunger up in there with the cartridge still loose. Everything's working. It's primed. Now we can tighten the cartridge into the head. This works every time. I have seen so many people struggle and fight with trying to get prime on a grease gun. It's not that hard. You just got to get the air out, man. Now, we can go back there again. All right. Get back on this guy here. There you go. Keep on pumping. Oh, look at that. Look. I was like 2 pumps away from having that done. So that's one thing I've never invested in, is one of those locking and unlocking grease fitting things. Oh, if you guys have ever fought with that particular situation I just did right there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But cool, that one's done. Wonder how much crapped out the other side. We got some, but it's not too bad. Now we'll just do the same thing for the other one. Cool. Come on, you little devil. Oh, man, those are good Zerk fittings. Those things really bite on her. Throw that in the most inconvenient place possible and definitely going to make dirty later. But now we got all that out. In the event your deck is not as awesomely clean as this one, take this as your opportunity. You know, get in there with a wire brush or something, maybe you can, a Rust-Oleum. You know, give her that DuPont overhaul, and you know, take your time with this. Do your maintenance. Now, like I mentioned, when we're going back together here, make sure your blade goes back on the same way it came off, because this will cause you a world of problems that may not be super evident of what the problem is. In case you guys are wondering about a torque spec for these, yes, there is one. What is that torque spec, do you ask? I don't know. Setting 3 on the impact. Yeah. We call that German specs. Gudentight. Sure. Call that good. So once you're satisfied under here, we are all sharpened, everything's put back together and greased. I suppose we can focus on the top part of this thing. And since the top bearing on these spindles is technically a sealed bearing, like the spindle that we packed underneath, that's like the assembly inside of that casting. So it's just good to keep that packed and keep the water out of there. But the top bearing, it's supposed to be sealed, you know, weather tight, but yeah, unless you spend a bunch of money on like an SKG or some kind of good bearing, yeah, whatever. So I'm going to get me some PB or something like that, just some good penetrating oil, and just hose down the top of these bearings. You know, give them a little something other than just gunk and water. So go ahead and grab your finest can of aerosol lubricant, you know, of your choice. And I tell you what, this would be a perfect application if you had like one of those hypodermic things, but you know, make do with what you can. So I'm going to go ahead and try to lube these things up. It's not like it'll hurt. These guys right here on top that I'm playing with, these are called idlers. This is what allows that serpentine action to happen on top of your deck. This is another severe failure point that I've run across. I replace these things probably every 3 years or so, simply because these bearings are so exposed and water sits in there and this and that. You know, these things just seize up like you wouldn't believe. So keeping these things good and oiled, good idea. Now make sure whenever you're doing this step, do not get oil on the belt. Yeah, because V-belts rely on friction to drive. So if the belt is all covered in oil and lube and stuff, ain't gonna drive very well. You're gonna have all kinds of issues. Nice. Now, for the most part, all of our moving surfaces, including our you know, sealed bearings, everything for the most part is lubed up and greased very well. So we can start on reassembly. So I'm going to try my best to do this without being in your way for the entire thing. But this is pretty much a reverse operation of what we did the first time. Just throw her on in there. Make sure that you got all your linkages and whatnots out of the way. Oh, and effectively put the deck in backwards. Ah! You knew that was happening as I was doing it. You knew it. You knew it. Oh, okay. Okay, let's try this again, shall we? I had to compose myself for just a moment. Oh. You know the old saying, we do it right because we do it twice. That's what happens whenever I start thinking about you guys and doing this and that instead of paying attention to what the heck I'm doing. Now we have it oriented correctly with the discharge chute on this side. Go ahead, throw it in a hole. There we go. And we're already starting to line up. So we'll go ahead and start throwing pins back in this thing and get her all mounted. So I'll try to get you down here for a little bit better view this time. I know, kind of didn't show you much on the disassembly, but you can see here, there's just a bunch of brackets. When everything lines up, it all just kind of folds together. So yes, it is a jigsaw puzzle, but that's why I mentioned at the beginning, it may behoove you to take a photograph of this thing before you tear it apart so you know exactly how it goes back together. Go ahead, throw our keeper pins back in here. Cool. That's this side. There you go. This front tie rod is kind of what's responsible for making the level of your deck. So once we get that on here, if you guys want to, this would now be the time to measure everything and make sure that your deck is flat. Now that everything's reassembled, the last thing that we have to do is reroute the pulley onto the drive belt for the deck. Now, this isn't too bad. You struggle with it a little bit, she will go. And there it is. Just make sure that everything's routed correctly on the deck. There, for the most part, there is a sticker on the deck that'll tell you how everything goes. Now we just check for function. Sure looks like it's working to me. Now that we got that extra add a little step in there and out of the way, I suppose we can go back to the cleaning that I mentioned, because the engine compartment is so important to be clean. You can keep an eye on that crap. So, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and spit shine this guy a little bit. Man, that is so nice. So nice. So go ahead and grab you some all-purpose cleaner. My particular favorite is Purple Power, the concentrate, but don't unconcentrate it. Like, ugh, man, this is good stuff. It's especially for this stuff like this, like farm and ag, off-road crap. This stuff works amazing. Oh boy, yeah. Make sure you spray that right into the wind. Well, now that we are all finished up, I suppose the only thing left to do is mow. You know, and I know it's like a chore, but it's also like a dad thing. I don't mind it. It's pretty cool. And I know that my equipment is going to hold up. We've gone through everything. It's good to go. And it's clean. Look at that. We have something going on under here. I'm going to notice it because I check the oil before I run this thing every time. So you open the hood and you see something like, oh, I know that wasn't there when I did my routine maintenance this year. So get this old girl back down on the ground and see what she's got. All right. Yeah. How many lawn tractors do you know with aftermarket LED marker lights on the hood too? Oh yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed this little side project. I know it's just a regular old dad task, but hey man, this stuff needs done. I don't care who you are or where you are, you know, stuff like this needs to be taken care of. And honestly, this is like a sense of pride kind of thing. You got stuff that's nice, keep it nice. You know, it doesn't take all that much know-how. I mean, for all this stuff, I don't think I really used any tools for this other than an oil filter wrench. But like I mentioned, I will link all the crap down in the description in case you want to do this particular project for yourself. I mean, there are so many different makes and models, you know, chances of you having this same one are slim to none, but it is just a regular run-of-the-mill Kohler engine. But yeah, so maybe somebody even got something out of this, you know, give you that little kick in the butt to get out there and maintenance your equipment. If I didn't tell you this thing was a 23-year-old tractor, you probably wouldn't know. I mean, this thing, for all intents and purposes, is still in great shape, and it's going to run for a long time. And if I have anything to do with it, you know, keeping up on the maintenance, watching the bearings, changing the oil, you know, painting rusty spots before they become cancer, you know. So, yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this thing, and keep the shiny side up. Keep on mowing. and we'll see you next time.